We start with the news that has captivated the nation, the news that has kept the political class on the edge of its seats, the battle royale in Washington that has kept the nation riveted, the political fight that's put C-SPAN ratings through the roof as kids skip summer and parents skip work because they cannot turn away from the televised drama in D.C. It is, of course, the epic battle over Elena Kagan's nomination to the Supreme Court. And it took an important turn today. Today the Senate started debating her nomination. Sort of a done deal. She's going to get in. And yeah, that's it. The Elena Kagan battle turned out to be a bit of a bust in terms of the politics. The people who are disappointed that it turned out to be a bit of a bust are the people who count on Supreme Court nominations being one of those big Washington fights that raise lots of money for the perceived combatants. The direct mail, the TV ads, the send us money now or the republic will crumble appeals. Despite what they said was some early promise in this Supreme Court nomination, the Elena Kagan battle seems to have turned out to be a financial bust for conservative groups that were hoping otherwise. It certainly wasn't as financially fruitful as, say, the health reform battle was a year earlier. Now, that was a financial winner. Railing against Obamacare was a custom-built issue for Washington political machines that exist to gin up outrage and thereby raise some money. It was so good that Republicans keep trying to go back to that well by saying they're going to repeal Obamacare. Now, are they actually going to repeal it? Are they taking steps to try to repeal it? No and no. But saying that helps them raise money, and that's really the name of the game here. But that health care issue is not going to last forever, and I think they're starting to realize that now, particularly because repealing it means things like repealing the pre-existing conditions ban, which Americans sort of like. So if Obamacare goes away as a fundraising issue, what's next?
The American people strongly support the biggest positive impact that you could have on the economy, the so-called Bush tax cuts of 01 and 03.
Extend the Bush tax cuts. And this is not just a call from elected Republican politicians. It's also now a call from the conservative political machine, which is hoping that this is the next political hot button they can use to fill their financial coffers. One group in particular has decided to enlist a little star power for their effort. Former Law & Order star turned failed Republican presidential candidate Fred Thompson. Check this out.
Folks, America's economy is struggling, and Congress is about to make it a whole lot worse. Our nation faces a massive automatic tax increase at the end of this year when the Bush tax cuts expire. When that happens, your income taxes could increase by 10% or more. Capital gains taxes will jump over 30%. Taxes on dividends will more than double. It's not a pretty picture. But taxes will increase automatically unless you act.
Not a pretty picture. Not a pretty picture. That lusciously bearded, endlessly repeatable Fred Thompson ad directs you to a website called renewthetaxcuts.com. See there? Renewthetaxcuts.com. If you actually go to renewthetaxcuts.com, you will find that it is a project of something called the League of American Voters. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, if that's ringing bells in your head as a legitimate, respected organization, that's because you're probably thinking of the League of Women Voters. This is not that. This is the League of American Voters, and their Renew the Tax Cuts website essentially regurgitates all that stuff that you heard Fred Thompson say on the TV machine. But it also urges you to, surprise, help support the League financially so that it can share this important message with America via TV commercials. Yeah, extend the Bush tax cut, sure, but whatever, but send us some money. Send us whatever you can. In addition to your donation, you're even invited to become a member for the low membership fee of just $25. The League of American Voters. The League of American Voters. It's meant to sound grassrootsy, right? It's meant to sound like this organic movement of regular Americans out there who believe this thing. That's the way the group pitches itself on its website. We are America's voters, they say. Right at the top there, you can see a few dozen pictures of who they say we are. Just your average businessman, businesswoman, doctor, grandma, all walks of life, all nationalities. Now, if this construction guy looks familiar to you, it might be because he works at a construction site near your house, I don't know. Or it might be because you've seen him in other made-to-look-like normal people places, since you can purchase his photo at iStockphoto.com. Easy to find if you search under construction worker portrait. In reality, the League of American Voters isn't construction worker guys like that. It's more this guy. That's Bob Adams. Bob Adams, executive director of the group, as well as a longtime Republican Party activist. Back in the 90s, he was an aide to then Republican Congressman J.C. Watts. He later launched his own failed bid for elected office as a Republican in West Virginia. The League of Fake Clip Art American Voters is also represented by the very, very able, very, very connected conservative PR firm of Shirley and Bannister. Shirley and Bannister, which howls like a wounded animal anytime we mention their existence on television, and especially when we point out that their other run-of-the-mill, just everyday, average American clients include folks like the NRA, Citizens United, famous from their Supreme Court case, and the ultra-conservative Club for Growth. Those are the drowned government in the bathtub people. Now, the League of American Voters is fairly new to the gin-up anger for money game. But they did get in when the getting was good. According to records for the website, the group appears to have been launched in July of last year, which was, of course, smack dab in the middle of the Summer of Obamacare fight. They jumped right into that battle with this ad, this Obama wants to pull the plug on your grandma ad.
It will hurt our seniors and Medicare as we know it. Ration coverage and care is happening in England and in Canada. Don't let it happen here.
I wonder if he came from iStock Photos, too. Stop Obamacare, yeah, but also send us money. This is how they do these things, right? A really great investigation by the Huffington Post at the time revealed that in less than 2 months during the health reform fight, the League of American Voters managed to raise about $1.7 million in donations. Hot buttons work. We tried to reach out to the group today to find out how much money they have now, where they get their funding from. Conveniently, they do not list a phone number on their website, nor do they bother to respond to any of our email requests. But that's kind of what these groups do. They lurk underneath the surface. They latch onto a political issue, particularly one that scares the dickens out of people. They portray it in the scariest way possible, and then they line their own pockets in the process. It is a cottage industry. All of this is not to say that Bob Adams and Shirley and Bannister and the fake construction worker clip art guy are bad people. I'm sure they're very nice people. But this isn't about them as individuals. It also isn't, by the way, about whether or not the Bush tax cuts expire. It's about this as a cottage industry. It's about groups like this raising money for the machine that exists for issues like this. Groups that exist to turn political fear, to turn politics into fear, into money. It's about innocuous-sounding groups like the League of American Voters trying to pass themselves off as just like you and me, just your average Americans, when they're actually D.C.-based money-generating machines that quite literally feed off of Americans' fears. If you're not afraid, they don't make money. These groups have every right to do what they're doing. But this should not be confused with politics. This is the theater of politics. This isn't a real fight over a real thing. They don't care about whether they get the facts right. This is using politics as a platform for making money. But can it do real harm when what they're making money off of, what they are demagoguing, is really expensive and really important policy? Joining us now is Ezra Klein, staff writer for The Washington Post and MSNBC contributor. Mr. Klein, thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Rachel.
So Fred Thompson says this giant tax hike is coming. So send the clip art construction worker group your money in order to stop this from happening. As a policy guy, Ezra, how do you evaluate Fred Thompson's pitch here?
It's a really neat trick they've pulled. So a bit of quick history here. In 2001, Bush administration wants to do tax cuts, but they don't have 60 votes in the Senate, which, as all viewers of the Rachel Maddow show know, is what you need to get anything done. So they used budget reconciliation, and budget reconciliation was built to reduce the deficit. So it had rules to make sure you didn't increase the deficit. They got around that rule by creating a 10-year expiration. They did not increase the deficit outside of what's called the budget window. And what they understood quite well at the beginning of this was that after 10 years, nobody would want to allow a tax increase to come into being. But it worked out even better than they thought, because at the end of 10 years, they were out of power, which probably is not actually what they wanted, but they could hammer the Democrats for what is now being called by Jim DeMint and others the Democrats' tax increase. Now, this was written by Republicans into law. If all Democrats died in a fire tomorrow, it would still be happening at the end of this year, absent legislative action. But it has become a very, very potent political issue for them.
And still, Democrats, even if everybody in the country understood that background, and I think not many people do, I still think Democrats end up at this sort of massive disadvantage here, because in order to explain why extending the Bush tax cuts beyond the date when they're going to expire is bad, you have to ask people to sort of hold on until the end of the sentence. And if the first two words of the sentence are tax cuts, that sounds so positive that nobody can sort of stand sticking through to hear the math about why letting them expire makes so much more sense for the economy and particularly for the deficit.
When you're explaining, you're losing. It's an old political truism,
yeah.
and it stands here. And it's a remarkable trap the Republicans have sprung on the Democrats. I mean, it's a Bond villain level. On the one hand, they get to hammer the Democrats for a tax increase if they let these tax cuts expire. On the other hand, if Democrats do extend the tax cuts, that'll add $4 trillion to the deficit.